The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath the crystal dome. For 12,000 years, this place had been the heart of galactic civilization. 100 different species sent their representatives here to argue, negotiate, and shape the future of countless worlds. Ambassador Catherine Cole walked through the massive doors one final time. She was 67 years old, with silver hair, pulled back in a simple braid. Her face showed the lines of someone who had spent decades smiling, though she was not smiling now. Behind her walked 3 other humans: Admiral Nathan Price, a tall man with broad shoulders and tired eyes, Dr. Lisa Grant, whose gentle face hid one of the sharpest minds humanity had ever produced, and Marcus Webb, a cultural specialist who had spent 40 years learning to understand alien ways of thinking. The 4 humans made their way to the small platform reserved for their species. It was positioned near the back of the chamber, far from the elevated seats of the elder races. Humanity had joined the Council 300 years ago, and in all that time, they had never been moved closer to the center. Counselor Vetharani of the Selthari Dominion was speaking when the humans arrived. The Selthari were beings of living crystal, their bodies catching and reflecting light in patterns that conveyed emotion. Right now, Vetharani's form sparkled with self-importance as they discussed trade routes through their territory. Catherine waited patiently. She had learned patience in this chamber. All humans had. When Vetharani finished, High Counselor Zethani, an ancient being whose species had helped found the Council itself, gestured toward the human platform. It was a small courtesy, one that often came with a tone of mild annoyance. "The human delegation wishes to address the Council," Zethani announced. "We will allow a brief statement." Catherine stepped forward. The chamber fell into a distracted quiet. Most representatives continued their private conversations, expecting nothing important from the small, short-lived species in the back. "Thank you, High Counselor," Catherine said. Her voice was calm and clear. "I will be brief, as you request. The United Earth Coalition has reached a decision. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council." The private conversations stopped. "We withdraw from all treaties," Catherine continued. "All trade agreements, all mutual defense pacts, all scientific exchanges, all cultural programs. We are leaving Council space entirely." Counselor Vethrani's crystal form flickered with confusion. "Leaving? Ambassador Cole, surely you are not serious. Where would you go? There is nothing beyond Council space worth having." "That is not your concern," Catherine replied. Counselor Mithra of the Arvani Collective rose from their seat. The Arvani were tall, slender beings with 4 arms and skin that shifted color with their moods. Right now, Mithra had turned a pale shade of blue, the color of worry. "Ambassador, if humanity has grievances, we should discuss them. The Council has always been open to negotiation." Catherine looked at Mithra for a long moment. Then she looked around the chamber at the hundreds of representatives watching her. Some seemed confused. Others seemed annoyed at the interruption. A few, very few, seemed genuinely concerned. "The Council has never been open to anything regarding humanity," Catherine said quietly. "Not once in 300 years. She reached into her coat and removed a small data chip. She placed it on the podium before her. "This contains a complete record of every formal complaint humanity has filed with this Council, every request for equal treatment, every proposal for fair representation, every appeal for basic recognition." She paused. "There are over 6,000 entries. Not one has ever received a response." The chamber was silent now. 62 years ago, I stood in this exact spot and asked this council to acknowledge humanity's contributions to galactic society. I listed our achievements, our discoveries, our gifts to other species. I asked only that we be treated as equals. Catherine's voice remained steady. My request was filed away. No one ever read it. High Counselor Zethani shifted uncomfortably. Ambassador Cole, if there have been administrative oversights, I am certain they can be addressed. There is no need for such dramatic action. It is not dramatic, Catherine said. It is simply final. She turned to her three companions. Admiral Nathan Price nodded once. Dr. Lisa Grant closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with resolve. Marcus Webb looked around the chamber one last time, his expression unreadable. We came to you 300 years ago with open hands, Catherine said, turning back to face the council. We asked only for friendship, for partnership, for the chance to stand beside you and build something greater than any of us could build alone. She paused. You gave us a platform in the back of the room. You took our technology and called it primitive. You accepted our help and forgot to say thank you. You invited us to your wars, and then complained that we did not fight correctly. You asked us to solve your problems, and then resented us when we succeeded. Counselor Vetherani's crystal form had gone dark, a sign of deep discomfort. Ambassador, these are serious accusations. They are not accusations, Catherine replied. They are facts. And we are tired of facts being ignored. She stepped down from the podium. Wait, Counselor Mithra called out. You cannot simply leave. We have agreements, obligations, dependencies. Catherine stopped walking. She turned back to face the Arvani counselor. Yes, she said softly. You do have dependencies. Perhaps you should have thought about that before treating us as though we did not matter. The four humans walked toward the great doors. No one tried to stop them. No one quite knew how. Admiral Nathan Price paused at the threshold. He looked back at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization, beings who commanded fleets of thousands of ships, who ruled empires spanning hundreds of worlds, who had shaped the course of history for millennia. You will not hear from us again, he said. We will not answer your calls. We will not respond to your messages. We will not come when you need us. He turned away. Good luck. The doors closed behind the humans with a sound like thunder. For a long moment, no one in the chamber spoke. Then, slowly, conversations began to resume. Most of the representatives assumed this was a negotiating tactic, a dramatic gesture meant to extract concessions. They returned to their business, trade routes, border disputes, resource allocations, the endless machinery of galactic politics. It took them 48 hours to realize that every human ship had vanished. Every human colony stood empty. Every human station had gone dark. 300 years of human presence in the galaxy had disappeared overnight. And the silence that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. The first problems appeared within a week. On the border between the Selthari Dominion and the Kethvari Hegemony, a patrol station went offline. This station had monitored the neutral zone for over 200 years, preventing the two hostile powers from starting another devastating war. It had been staffed entirely by humans. No one had thought to ask why. Counselor Vetherani sent engineers to restore the station's systems. The engineers arrived to find every computer wiped clean, every database erased, every piece of equipment shut down in a way that made it impossible to restart. The humans had not destroyed anything. They had simply taken their knowledge with them. 3 days later, the Kethvari Hegemony moved warships into the neutral zone. The Selthari responded in kind. Within a month, The two powers were fighting again, a conflict that had been prevented for 2 centuries by the simple presence of human peacekeepers. But the border war was only the beginning. Counselor Mithra of the Arvani Collective received an urgent message from the medical ministry. A plague called the Wasting had appeared again on 3 Arvani colony worlds. This disease had nearly destroyed the Arvani species 400 years ago. It had been cured by a human doctor named Lisa Grant, who had spent 20 years of her life developing a treatment. The treatment required a specific compound. The compound was manufactured in human laboratories, and now those laboratories were empty. "Can we not produce this compound ourselves?" Mithra demanded. The medical minister shifted to a deep shade of gray, the color of despair. "We never learned how." "The humans offered to teach us many times. We always said we would learn later. There was no urgency. The humans were always there." Mithra closed their 4 eyes. "How much supply remains?" "Enough for perhaps 6 months. After that..." The minister trailed off. The Arvani were not the only species facing this problem. Human doctors had developed treatments for diseases affecting 17 different council races. Human engineers had designed the systems that allowed different species to communicate with each other. Human programmers had built the financial networks that made interstellar trade possible. None of this had been secret. The humans had done all of it openly, sharing their work freely with anyone who asked. They had asked for nothing in return except friendship and respect. They had received neither. High Counselor Zethani called an emergency session of the council. The chamber that had seemed so grand and permanent now felt fragile. Representatives who had barely noticed humanity's departure were now desperate to understand what had happened. "We must find them," Zethani declared. "They cannot have gone far. The galaxy is vast, but not infinite." Counselor Vethrani agreed. "They are only humans, small, short-lived, limited. They do not have the resources to simply disappear." A voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It belonged to Representative Kethani of the Morvani, a small, quiet species that had joined the council only 50 years ago. "With respect," Kethani said softly, "you still do not understand." The chamber turned to look at the small representative. Kethani continued despite the attention. "The humans did not disappear because they lacked resources. They disappeared because they planned this for a very long time, perhaps for generations." Kethani's voice was sad. "I reviewed their historical records. 60 years ago, Ambassador Cole warned this council that humanity felt unvalued. 30 years ago, Admiral Price submitted a formal proposal for human representation on the Security Committee. It was rejected without discussion. 20 years ago, Dr. Grant published a paper noting that humanity provided 70% of all medical innovations in council space. The paper was ignored. Representative Kethani looked around the chamber. "The humans told us they were leaving, we did not listen, and now they are gone, and we are discovering that we needed them far more than we ever admitted." The chamber fell silent. In the weeks that followed, the scope of humanity's contributions became horrifyingly clear. Human engineers had designed the translation systems that allowed the Council's 100 species to understand each other. Without regular maintenance that humans had provided without charge, these systems began to fail. Misunderstandings led to arguments. Arguments led to conflicts. Human traders had served as neutral parties in disputes between hostile powers. With the traders gone, old hatreds resurfaced. Wars that had been prevented for centuries now seemed inevitable. Human artists had created works that bridged cultural gaps between species. Human musicians had composed songs that different races could enjoy together. Human writers had told stories that helped aliens understand each other. This soft power had been invisible, but its absence was devastating. Marcus Webb, the cultural specialist who had walked out of the council chamber with Ambassador Cole, had personally prevented 6 potential genocides through careful diplomacy. He had spent 40 years building relationships, learning languages, understanding customs. His work had been so successful that most species had forgotten how close they had come to destroying each other. Now, without Marcus and others like him, those old tensions returned. 3 months after humanity's departure, the Kethvari hegemony conquered 4 Arvani border worlds. The Arvani collective, weakened by the return of the wasting, could not mount an effective defense. Counselor Mithra addressed the council with skin colored the deep black of mourning. "We called them the convenient species," Mithra said quietly. "We used them for everything and valued them for nothing. They solved our problems, healed our sick, built our systems, kept our peace, and we treated them as servants, as tools, as things to be used and discarded." Mithra looked at the empty platform in the back of the chamber, where the human delegation had once stood. "We did not drive them away with cruelty. We drove them away with indifference, and that may be worse." High Counselor Zeth Ani had no response. None of them did. The galaxy continued to tremble. The humans remained silent. And slowly, terribly, the council began to understand what they had lost. Scout Commander Vetharala had served the Selthari Dominion for over 300 years. Her crystal form had been polished by countless battles and hardened by centuries of experience. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had witnessed wonders and horrors beyond counting. But she had never faced a mission like this one. High Counselor Zeth Ani had given her a single order: find the humans. Find them and bring them back, whatever it takes. Vetharala assembled a fleet of 50 ships, the best scouts the council could provide. They carried the most advanced sensors, the fastest engines, the most skilled crews. They set out with confidence, certain that finding one small species could not be difficult. 2 years later, Vetharala sat alone in her command chamber, surrounded by maps that showed nothing. The humans had vanished completely. Her fleet had searched every system where humanity had once lived. They found empty stations and abandoned colonies. Buildings stood intact, lights still working, air still flowing. But every computer had been wiped clean. Every database had been erased. Every piece of technology had been shut down in ways that made it impossible to trace. The humans had not fled in panic. They had left in perfect order, taking only what they needed and erasing everything else. It was the work of decades, perhaps generations, of careful planning. Vetharala had interviewed thousands of aliens who had known humans personally. Most remembered little. The humans had been friendly but private. They had shared their work freely but spoken rarely about themselves. They had lived among the other species for 300 years, yet somehow remained strangers. "They were always there when we needed them," a Morvani trader had told Vetharala. "But when the work was done, they went back to their own quarters. They did not seek our company. They did not ask for our friendship. They simply existed beside us." "Did you ever ask about their lives?" Vetharala had wondered. "Their families? Their hopes?" The trader had looked confused. "Why would I? They were humans. They were useful. What more was there to know?" Vetharala had heard variations of this answer 1,000 times. The humans had been everywhere and known by no one. They had given everything and received nothing in return. And when they finally left, they left no trace behind. The search expanded beyond council space. Vetharala's fleet pushed into the dark regions between spiral arms where no civilization had ever ventured. They found nothing but empty stars and ancient rocks. Some crew members began to wonder if the humans had destroyed themselves, if their departure had been a final act of desperation. But Vetharala did not believe this. The humans had not seemed desperate. They had seemed tired. They had seemed sad. But beneath the sadness, Ambassador Cole had carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The humans were out there, somewhere. They had simply become invisible. Back in Council space, the situation continued to worsen. The war between the Selthari and the Kethvari had spread to 3 neighboring systems. The Arvani wasting had killed 2 million people before a partial cure was found in old human research notes. The translation systems failed completely on 7 worlds, causing riots and massacres. Counselor Mithra spent months searching through historical archives. What they found was painful to read. Humanity had tried to warn the Council, again and again, through formal complaints and informal conversations, through papers and proposals and pleas. They had asked only to be seen, to be valued, to be treated as partners rather than servants. The Council had ignored them every single time. They submitted 6,000 formal complaints over 300 years, Mithra reported to the Council. 6,000 requests for fair treatment, for recognition, for basic dignity. We did not reject these requests. We did not argue with them. We simply forgot about them. We filed them away and never looked at them again. High Counselor Zethani struggled to understand. But we gave them so much. Access to our technology, permission to trade in our markets, protection from external threats. Were these things not valuable? They were valuable to us, Mithra replied. The humans gained access to technology they could have developed themselves within a few generations. They gained permission to trade goods they could have sold elsewhere. They gained protection from threats that would never have existed if they had stayed in their own space. Mithra's skin shifted to a color that had no name, a shade that expressed shame and sorrow and understanding all at once. We gave them nothing they needed. They gave us everything we needed. And we called this partnership. Scout Commander Vethrala continued her search for another year. Her fleet shrank as ships returned home with damaged engines and exhausted crews. The dark spaces between stars yielded no secrets. Finally, Vethrala made a decision. She would take a single ship to the very edge of the galaxy, to the places where the stars grew thin and the darkness stretched forever. If the humans had truly wanted to disappear, they would have gone as far as possible from the civilization that had failed them. Her crew thought she was foolish. Her commanders told her to return home. But Vethrala had spent 3 years searching for ghosts, and she was not ready to give up. She pointed her ship toward the distant darkness and flew into the unknown. The journey took 6 months. The stars fell away behind her until the galaxy itself became a distant spiral of light. Ahead lay nothing but void. And then, on the very edge of everything, Vethrala's sensors detected something. A signal. Faint, but clear. Mathematical patterns that could only have been created by intelligent beings. Vethrala adjusted her course and followed the signal into the darkness. What she found there would change everything. But that discovery, and the conversations that followed, would have to wait for another day. For now, Vethrala simply sat in her command chamber, watching the signal grow stronger, and wondered what she would say to the humans when she finally found them. What could anyone say after everything that had happened? She did not know, but she was determined to find out. The structure orbited a dying star at the very edge of existence. It was massive beyond comprehension, larger than any space station the Council had ever built, larger than some of the smaller moons in settled systems. Its surface gleamed with lights that spoke of life and activity, a beacon of civilization in the endless dark. Scout Commander Vetharala brought her ship closer, her crystal form flickering with emotions she could not name. After 3 years of searching, after following cold trails and empty leads across half the galaxy, she had found them. The humans were here. A shuttle bay opened in the station's hull. A clear invitation. Vetharala considered calling for backup, but decided against it. If the humans wanted to harm her, they could have destroyed her ship already. Instead, they were welcoming her. She docked her shuttle and stepped out alone. The bay was clean and well lit, filled with equipment she did not recognize. Human technology had always seemed simple compared to Council standards, but this was different. These machines were elegant and efficient in ways that surprised her. A door opened, and 2 humans walked through. The first was Ambassador Catherine Cole. She had aged in the 12 years since her departure from the Council. Her silver hair was now white, her face more lined, her movements slower. But her eyes held the same quiet strength that Vetharala remembered from that final speech in the council chamber. The second human was younger, a man in his 30s, with Catherine's sharp features and thoughtful expression. He wore a uniform that Vetharala did not recognize, with a captain's insignia on his shoulder. "Scout Commander," Catherine said. Her voice was calm, almost warm. "You came faster than we expected." Vetharala struggled to find words. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, imagining what she would say when she finally found the humans. Now that the moment had arrived, all her prepared speeches seemed meaningless. "The galaxy is dying," she finally said. "Wars, plagues, collapse. We need... "You need us," Catherine replied. It was not a question. "Yes." Vetharala's crystal form dimmed with shame. "Yes, we need you. We did not understand how much until you were gone." Catherine nodded slowly. She gestured toward a doorway. "Walk with me, Commander. There are things you should see." They walked through corridors filled with humans going about their daily lives. Children ran past, laughing. Workers carried equipment. Families shared meals in common areas. The station pulsed with energy and purpose. "This is the Seed Vault," the young man explained. His name, he said, was Captain Daniel Cole, Catherine's grandson. "We built it over 60 years in secret while we still lived among you. It contains everything we are, our DNA, our culture, our history, our technology, everything necessary to rebuild humanity if we ever decide to return." Vetharala looked around in wonder. "You planned this for so long?" "My grandmother submitted her first formal complaint to the council when she was 23 years old," Daniel said. "She spent the next 60 years watching those complaints be ignored. By the time she realized that nothing would ever change, she was already ambassador, and by then, we had been building this station for decades." They reached an observation deck that looked out over the vast darkness between galaxies. The Milky Way hung in the distance, a spiral of light that contained everything Vetharala had ever known. "We did not leave to punish you," Catherine said quietly. "We are not a vengeful people. We left because staying was killing us." She turned to face Vetharala. "Do you know what it feels like to give everything you have, your knowledge, your labor, your creativity, your love, and receive nothing in return? Not hatred. Hatred would have been easier. At least hatred acknowledges that you exist. But we received nothing at all. We were useful, and that was all anyone cared about." Vetharala's crystal form had gone completely dark. "Ambassador Cole? Catherine? I do not know what to say." "You do not need to say anything," Catherine replied. The Council has already said everything that matters through its actions, or rather, through its inaction. Daniel stepped forward. When the Council was forming its first alliances 12,000 years ago, humanity was still learning to farm. When you were building your great civilization, we were painting pictures on cave walls. We came to you as children, eager to learn, eager to help, eager to be part of something greater than ourselves. His voice hardened slightly. And you treated us like servants, like tools, like things that existed only to solve your problems and then be forgotten until you needed us again. Vethrala had no response. Everything the humans said was true. "What must we do?" she asked finally. "What can we do to bring you back?" Catherine looked at her grandson, then back at Vethrala. For a long moment, she was silent. "I am 93 years old," she said at last. "I have spent most of my life trying to answer that question, and I still do not have a simple answer." She walked closer to the observation window. "The Council is not evil. Its members are not cruel. They simply never thought about us. We were convenient, and convenience does not require thought. You used us the way you might use a tool, and you forgot that tools do not have feelings." "But we do have feelings," Daniel added. "We have hopes and dreams and fears. We have families and friends and communities. We have art and music and stories. We have everything that makes a species real. But you never asked about any of it." Vethrala understood. The humans had not wanted power or wealth or territory. They had wanted something far simpler and far more precious. They had wanted to be seen. "If I return to the Council," Vethrala said slowly, "and tell them what I have learned here, will you listen?" Catherine smiled, a small, sad expression that held decades of disappointment. "We have always listened," she said. "We have always been willing to talk. The question is whether the Council is ready to hear us." She placed a weathered hand on Vethrala's crystalline arm. "Go back. Tell them what you have found. Tell them that humanity still exists, still hopes, still waits. And tell them that if they want us to return, they must first learn to ask a question they have never asked before." "What question?" Vethrala asked. Catherine Cole looked out at the distant galaxy, at the stars that had been her home, at the civilization that had failed her people, at the future that remained uncertain. "Ask us who we are," she said quietly. "Really ask, and then listen to the answer." Scout Commander Vethrala returned to Council space with a message that would change everything. The journey back took 6 months. 6 months of silence and contemplation as her ship crossed the vast darkness between the galactic rim and civilized space. She used the time to prepare her report, choosing each word with care. The Council had spent 12 years ignoring the consequences of their failure. They could not afford to ignore this. She arrived at the Council chamber on a day when the Great Hall was nearly empty. Wars and crises had scattered the representatives across the galaxy. High Counselor Zethani looked older than before, worn down by years of disasters that seemed to have no end. Vethrala told them everything. She described the Seed Vault, the massive station at the edge of existence where humanity had built a new home. She described her conversations with Ambassador Catherine Cole and Captain Daniel Cole. She shared their words exactly as they had been spoken, and then she shared the question that Catherine had asked her to deliver. "They want us to ask who they are," Vethrala said. "Not what they can do for us, not how they can solve our problems. Who they are as people, as a species, as beings with their own hopes and fears and dreams." High Counselor Zethani stared at her. "That is all they want? A question?" "It is not a small thing," Vethrala replied. In 300 years, we never asked it, not once. We took their help and their knowledge and their labor, and we never wondered why they gave so freely. We never asked about their families or their art or their beliefs. We never treated them as people worthy of curiosity. Counselor Mithra of the Arvani Collective spoke up. Their skin had shifted to a thoughtful shade of green. The humans gave us the cure for the wasting. Dr. Lisa Grant spent 20 years of her life developing that treatment. She saved millions of Arvani lives. And I cannot tell you a single thing about her. Not her family, not her hobbies, not what made her laugh. I never asked. Counselor Vethrani of the Selthari Dominion flickered with discomfort. Admiral Nathan Price designed the neutral zone patrols that kept peace between our people and the Kethvari for 200 years. I never thanked him. I never even learned his full name until I read his service record after the humans departed. One by one, the representatives began to speak. They shared memories of humans they had known, workers and diplomats, scientists and artists, teachers and healers. And they realized, with growing shame, how little they knew about any of them. The humans had been everywhere. They had touched every part of galactic civilization, and they had remained strangers the entire time. High Counselor Zeth Ani rose from their seat. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then they spoke in a voice heavy with regret. We have spent 12 years trying to find the humans so that they could save us. We have not once considered that they might need saving themselves, not from external threats, but from our indifference. Zethani looked around the chamber. We cannot undo what we have done. We cannot give back the 300 years of neglect. But we can choose what we do next, and I believe our next action should not be a demand for their return. It should be an apology for driving them away. The chamber fell silent. In the weeks that followed, something unprecedented happened. Species that had warred for centuries began to talk, not about territory or resources or power, about what they had learned from the human departure. A Kethvari commander released 300 Arvani prisoners and returned them to their homeworld. When asked why, he said, "The humans taught me that mercy is not weakness. I ignored that lesson for too long." A Selthari merchant guild began offering medical supplies to smaller species at no charge. Their leader explained, "The humans shared their knowledge freely. We took that generosity for granted. Perhaps it is time we learned to give as well as take." A coalition of smaller species, races that had been overlooked and dismissed by the great powers, formed their own council. They called it the Assembly of Equals. Its founding document was based on old human writings about democracy and dignity that had been discovered in abandoned archives. Representative Keth Ani of the Morvani was elected the Assembly's first speaker. In their acceptance speech, they quoted something Ambassador Catherine Cole had said in her final address to the Council. "We came to you with open hands. We asked only for friendship." Kethani looked out at the gathered representatives. Perhaps that is what we must learn to offer each other. Not alliance or advantage. Friendship, simple, genuine friendship. Back at the edge of the galaxy, the seed vault continued its quiet orbit around the dying star. Captain Daniel Cole stood on the observation deck, watching the distant light of civilized space. His grandmother joined him, moving slowly with the careful steps of the very old. Catherine Cole was 93 now, and her doctors had warned that she had only months left. But her mind remained sharp, and her eyes still held their ancient fire. "Scout Commander Vetharala sent a message," Daniel said. "The Council has formed a committee to study human culture. They are actually reading our literature, listening to our music, trying to understand who we are." Catherine smiled. It was a real smile, the first one Daniel had seen on her face in years. It only took them 300 years, she said. Do you think it will last? Do you think they will really change? Catherine was quiet for a long time. She looked out at the galaxy, at the spiral of stars that contained everything humanity had left behind. Wars still burned there. Crises still threatened. The damage of centuries would not be healed overnight. But something was different now. Something had shifted. Change is not a moment, she said finally. It is a process. It happens slowly, through countless small decisions and tiny acts of courage. The council took the first step when they admitted they were wrong. They took another step when they began to study our culture instead of demanding our return. She placed her hand on Daniel's shoulder. I spent my whole life hoping to see this day. I knew I probably never would. But here we are, Daniel. The galaxy is starting to listen. The galaxy is starting to learn. Daniel looked at his grandmother. This woman who had carried humanity's burden for so long, who had spoken truth to power and been ignored, who had made the painful decision to lead her people into exile, rather than watch them be slowly erased by indifference. What happens now? He asked. Catherine Cole turned toward the distant light of civilization. Somewhere out there, 100 species were learning to see each other clearly for the first time. Somewhere out there, the seeds of real change were being planted. Now, she said quietly, we wait, and we hope, and when they are ready, truly ready, we begin again. The galaxy quaked. Not with war, not with fear, not with the destruction of empires or the fall of great powers. It quaked with something far more powerful and far more rare. The first trembling steps toward understanding, and at the edge of everything, humanity watched and waited, ready to come home at last.